Koriyama town. The cream box smiles, no frowns around. Soft and sweet, with a glowing hue. It's the perfect snack for me and you.
Radioactive cream box, so what a treat. The core is still melting, but this bread is sweet. Fukushima's gift, just take a bite. Nothing's wrong here, it's alright, alright. Hoshano no aji, demo oishi. Hoshano no aji, demo oishi. Oh, so sweet,
But we won't regret. They say the cream is fresh, sourced from near, but what's in the air might not be clear. Take a bite, don't think too much. Locals cheer with every touch. Ooh, 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 ooh. They say the cream is fresh, sourced from near, but what's in the air might not be clear. Take a bite, don't think too much. Locals cheer with every touch. Filling the void with sugar and cream, a taste so rich you'd never dream. Safety's just a word they say, so let's enjoy it anyway. Ooh. Filling the void with sugar and cream, a taste so rich you'd never dream. Safety's just a word they say, so let's enjoy it anyway. Radioactive cream box, so what a treat. The core's still melting, but this bread is sweet. Fukushima's gift, just take a bite. Nothing's wrong here, it's alright. Mina taberu, mina let's celebrate. Beneath the surface, deeper truth. We celebrate while the core still fumes. But for now we'll close our eyes and take another bite, ignore the lies. Mojito kuchi, neo tojite. Mojito kuchi, neo tobre. Mojito kuchi, neo tobre. Another bite, ignore the lies.
Japan is feeding their kids and encourage them to eat these radioactive lunch boxes. The song is called Radioactive Cream Pie. I'm sorry, Radioactive Cream Box. It might as well be called Radioactive Cream Pie. You can find it over at James Lucett's site. Here. Good timing, you just post it. I thought I checked that about 15 minutes ago. I didn't see the video. Now it's there. Radioactive Cream Pie, and he's got 400 videos, almost all anti-nuclear music. He's got some amazing stuff. And I was listening to that song and I was saying to myself, he needs to approach musicians, agents. It's going to be hard to get hold of the musician, the superstars, but you can probably get hold of the agents because that's what they do, right? And send them a bunch of these songs and see if you can get them interested in some of those songs. So we got a crazy show again tonight. Again, we're seeing Japan promoting taking the soil. They spent $48 billion picking up 30 million one-ton bags of radioactive soil. And this was the idea of that was to make people complacent and think that solved the problem, right? So 30 million one-ton bags, because a one-ton pickup truck, everybody's probably familiar with that. You know the standard pickup trucks, the 3/4 ton, and then the one-ton pickup truck is the typical big pickup truck. And you can only put one of those bags in a one-ton pickup truck. So bumper to bumper pickup trucks of Fukushima bags would be 5 rows of traffic bumper to bumper around the entire planet. So this is absurd amount. They spent $48 billion, plus who knows how much more. They probably dumped twice as much in the rivers and the coastlines that we know about. And now that nobody's paying attention, they want to put it in farmland again. They took it out of the farmland so that people would think it was safe. Now nobody's, because people just can't wrap their mind around nuclear. Now they want to put it back into farmlands. I'm not laughing because we've been covering this story for a very long time. International Atomic Energy Agency in Japan. There was a story August 22nd, 2023. And August 24th was the day they officially said they're starting to dump water into the ocean. Nothing has ever gotten out, they said. Which is absurd to suggest because the buildings were all gone in 5 days. Such a convoluted story. But people are so complacent when it comes to nuclear. And a lot of people just still can't believe the government would lie to them, let alone all the governments, right? So and then not everybody, but the biggest majority of the planet is still significantly indoctrinated into the media. And so here's just a fraction of the journalists pretending they're on top of reactor 4 to your left, which is missing. There's only a stump left. It should be a 19-story, 65-meter, 190-foot building. So this story, the headline is very benign. Japan to ramp up search for disposal sites for soil. What they're actually planning on doing is reusing 75% of the soil that they acknowledge. So in 2000, it's such a convoluted story because it's going on for 14 years. There's 30 million one-ton bags. Now, the official story is there's no longer 30 million one-ton bags. There's 14 million. They made 16 million one-ton bags disappear. That's quite the scoop, right? That's pretty impressive on its own. The whole story is just, I got no concept of how how society is so dumbed down that this was even a thing. I'm just trying to bring up some supporting evidence. Give me 1 second. Here we go. All of a sudden, my throat is parched right out of the blue. Okay. I always try to use this. I rather use that screen, but the problem is we're going to cover a lot of sentences and paragraphs and whatever. And I want to make sure people can read the words themselves. So when we're covering a story like this, they can read all the extra words, because I'm not going to cover that stuff. But the idea is, so I'm completely open with the documentation. I'm not a radio show where I don't have to provide you any documentation. I could do that, and I should do that, but that's no longer an educational program. And it always takes me, it seems, 10 minutes for my voice gets up to speed. Playing Past the Parcel with Fukushima, 2016. Officials at the Ministry of Environment have said up to 30 million tons of radioactive waste will eventually be moved to yet another third-level interim storage facility near the crippled. The buildings are actually gone. They're not crippled, they're actually gone. Crippled Fukushima Daiichi disease factory. The bags deteriorate after 3 years. So the 30 million that they're talking about is 1 ton bags. And this is 2014. They're grown food. This is mainstream media picture that I got from Japan Media before they blocked you from downloading the pictures. You can still take screen captures, but it's not the same thing. They're harvesting food right alongside of thousands of 1 ton bags. And this is a nuclear wasteland itself where you can't live. But they're growing food. And we know it's for sale because they're not wearing their useless paper suits. How a paper suit ever became to be described as protective gear is beyond me. It's just, your media is so incredibly corrupt. There's nothing, and I mean nothing, that they won't do for any industry, let alone the nuclear industry. Okay, so there's 2 stories you need to know about. This story is 2019. It was 105,000 storage sites. Now, when they talk about green sheets, so people get the impression this is what they're talking about. But that's not what they're talking about. The bags are not square, the bags are round. And so the idea of showing you that particular picture, that's not round bags, that's something different. But they put that there, right, to downplay the fact that it's 105,000 sites in front of houses. No, most of it's in farmland. Right, 30 million, let me zoom in on that one up there. 30 million, you see that? 30 million tons of contaminated soil. Those bags need to be repackaged every 2 years, right? I'm just trying to lay a foundation for you anyway. On top of that, Japan will start burning radioactive waste. You got 1 billion pounds of debris. And just let me do the math on that, actually. Because I don't think we've ever done the math on that, have we? Because, the amount of lying these people exuberate in a 24-hour period is over the top. So you got 1 billion pounds, and you know what I'm going to with this. So a ton is 2,000 pounds. So divided by 2,000 pounds, I got 100 million. Give me another zero. I screwed up here. 1 billion pounds divided by 2,000 pounds. I'm sorry, it's Japan, so it's 2,200 pounds. It's metric. Like stupid Canada. So that's 454,000 1 ton bags of nuclear. This is different nuclear waste altogether. They're going to burn it. And what they done was, it was even worse, is they're burning the nuclear waste in incinerators. They're grinding it up and shipping it to all the prefectures with incinerators, communities with incinerators, and all the prefectures across the entire country, and burning the nuclear waste. This is just one of the many, many, many endless things to do. The garbage is already too radioactive to get rid of in those communities. The sewage is already too radioactive to get rid of in those communities across the entire country. The sediment from the water filtration facilities is too radioactive to get rid of from across the entire country. Try wrapping your minds around just those three facets. And then so the country should have been evacuated. I forgot to turn down the light again. Okay. And they're burning that. It's actually a lot more than that. 30 million one-ton bags. They're burning 1 billion pounds. Each pound is the equivalent of a dirty bomb. And that's the same thing for what's in the bags. But the bags are just... Now, the official story was it was 1 centimeter of topsoil, which is... There's 2.5 centimeters in an inch. Take a shovel. The next time you see a shovel, you're in the garden or somebody's garden. Pick up a shovel and try to scrape up the top centimeter. And there's 2.5 centimeters in an inch. So not even an inch, less than an inch, 2/5 of an inch of topsoil all over your property. Try doing that with a shovel. It doesn't work, right? And so they changed that number to 2 centimeters last year. We've been mocking them about it for many years in order to just try to highlight the nuttiness of this industry. These are 6 feet by 6 feet by 6 foot bags. These are massive bags that weren't meant to last more than 3 years. All right, here we go again. So back to this story. Japan to ramp up, and the reason we're doing this story is not because these stories got a tendency to disappear from people's minds very quickly. They'll get a bit of traction for a day or two, and if I don't seize that moment... And so I was going to do a die-off show tonight. Actually, I wasn't even going to do a show tonight. That's how burnt out I was today. Because we had good news yesterday, right? That by the end of September, I'll have another pension. The industry managed to get rid of my other pension through incredibly dubious and very powerful influences. And then my Canadian pension, which is comparable to my previous pension, is still shy, right? I'm still going to be shy. But all my bills will be covered every month. That means I can go to war again. And bless you people that got me through these 2 months, right? We're okay for this month, by the way. I'm going to make it through the month, and then I'll get my pension. And so I'm back in business. And so I think it's just that relief of finally... The stress of the last 4 or 5 weeks has been insane for me. Well, it's a little bit longer than that, right? It's 7 weeks, I guess. It's been quite a struggle. And I still got 4 weeks to get through, but there's light, a big bright light, and it's not a train at the end of the tunnel. So hopefully it's not a train. Okay, so soil. Let's talk about it. We're going to cover some of these stories. I shouldn't cover any of the stories because they're all propaganda, but it happens to be important to cover the stories because they're planning on giving the soil to private companies, which means they're going to put it anywhere they feel like it, and you're never going to know about it, and you're going to be eating the food most likely grown in it. And they're going to pick the worst, and this is what we see consistent. They always pick the worst case scenario to do with the soil, in other words, grow food into it. The industry is insane. And the things that they've done after Japan's meltdown are insane. It's like the industry is officially out to murder every species on the planet. That's the only way you can describe. That's the only way you can describe it, right? Oh, and another thing to talk about. Now, we know radiation goes down. It destroys the bacteria and the fungus. You've heard me talking about that, hopefully, many times. And so the radiation will, and we know this from Chernobyl and other sites in particular, that the radiation destroys the bacteria and the fungus through the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alpha shine, the X-rays, rather, blah, blah, blah. So it's the energy hitting each other almost at the speed of light. Each different types of gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, they don't mingle. So think of this as radioactive fallout. Each one is a gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. They're pulsing energy in every direction at the speed of light, but it's immediately going to hit another atom that's pulsing energy in every direction almost at the speed of light. And cesium, for instance, will pulse energy 600 feet. But you got to appreciate that Fukushima is a snowstorm. It's comparable to a snowstorm and even worse, unfortunately, in volume. It's like the whole planet's in an invisible snowstorm. But there's a problem with this snowstorm. It pulses energy at the speed of light. We've been getting it for 80 years. And now that is symmetrical through your forests and your fields. It kills the bacteria and the fungus in the ground, which the biota and the roots of all the plants and trees and the ecosystem is dependent upon. And the biota, which breaks down the foliage and the litter and is part of the ecosystem, right, recycles everything. That gets wiped out. And so when that's gone, the heat soaks up, the earth soaks up heat. It would never soak up the heat because the water would be there and it perspires every morning. That would feed all the plants during droughts and everything. So as you know, anybody who's been around here regularly, we have big forest fires, still ongoing, by the way, still considered dangerous, still out of control, incredible damage. And it's just on the other side of the mountain from me, right? It's not very far away. Can easily get here. We've just been very fortunate. I mean, we got smoked out there 2 weeks ago. But it came out today that you can't get the fire out because it's burning so deep underground. And pre-Fukushima, we've only seen this at nuclear contaminated sites. Now we're seeing it worldwide. All forest fires have that particular attribute, and that's why you're seeing so much. And the other problem with it is the forests have aggregated hundreds of years of or 80 years of radioactive, anthropogenic, man-made radioactive fallout. So when it burns, you can't destroy the radiation isotopes. You're just going to release it back into the environment. All right, let's keep going here. So foliage and soil uptake of cesium and strontium, that's just 2 of 1,000 isotopes by grapevines. Now there's millions, if you go and look up, this is PubMed, but you go up to any academic site, right, journal, Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, or any of their 20,000 subsidies, for instance, they produce 4.3 million studies a year. Probably half of the studies are on man-made radiation one way or another. And it's very difficult for people to comprehend how much the industry actually knows about man-made radiation. It's absurd. They studied every insect, every animal, every larvae, every plant, every facet of every plant, every facet of every insect, every facet. You're talking millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of studies just in North America. Russia would have done the same. China would have done the same. And so they know that food sucks up radiation. And I'm just going to give you quick examples of that. But the other question is, every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. So why would you do that when you have millions and millions of studies that talk about that, right? You got millions and millions of studies. So they know that the grapevines is going to suck up radiation. They know the strawberries are going to suck up radiation. And then they're growing food in these communities that should have been abandoned. And so the highlighted row there, number 3rd row from your left, my right, your left. This row is atoms per square meter, and so on the ground a square meter. Then population in 2010 of people in those communities, and the district, the name of the communities. Like this row here is Date City, this one is Fukushima City, which has a street there where 7 people dropped dead in the first year, shopping on a street. It's a shopping district. 7 people dropped dead in a single year. Who knows, it could have been 7,000 dropped dead after visiting it within a couple of days, right? And probably did. We know heart attacks, we know there was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Okay, so you got all these communities that they refused, the numbers for a nuclear plant, not 229,000 per square meter, it was 185, not 185,000, but 185, like the age of a turtle, for instance, right? 185 years. Think of 185. And my Geiger counter, 158 counts per second. 229,000. So these are nuclear wastelands. Anything over 185 counts per minute is considered a nuclear wasteland. So these people in the second row and those communities in the first row have been abandoned by the Japanese companies. So when you see these different frames and you'll see I'm going from A to D to F, we'll go through a bunch of communities there. But at the same time, they have incredible knowledge about how radiation is absorbed into the plants, which means the people that are living in the communities, which are surrounded by grass, the grass has the same attribute, it sucks up the radiation. The plants suck up the radiation, the trees suck up the radiation. Hence the reason we see these incredible numbers of radioactive pollen every year post-Fukushima. Accumulation of radionuclides by plants is a monitoring system. Foliage and root uptake of cesium, strontium, and 65 zirconium in processing tomato plants. Root uptake. This is really important because ultimately you kill the bacteria and the fungus in the root system. And then by proxy, you're going to kill the biota. And then by proxy, the soil can't soak up water. It's going to soak up heat, which is going to contribute to an increased temperature on ground level, right? And this is permanent. Nothing can grow. The bacteria and the fungus can't come back for millions of years. So this is not going to get any better ever. It's only going to get worse every year. And now we're seeing forest fires, for instance, where I'm to, in winter. We've never heard tell of anything like it. Nobody has. But now we're seeing this symmetrically right around the entire planet. So these are different towns. The second row is the population. The next row, this row here, is the just cesium. Now we're only talking about, that row is only cesium-137. And for every cesium-130, which by the way pulses energy 600 feet every second each atom, you're talking about there's 100 times more strontium-90 after 1,000 days. There's still a lot right then, the first 1,000 days, after almost 3 years. But after 3 years, the ratio of production from a nuclear meltdown is 100 to 1 of strontium-90. And the ratio of cesium-137 and iodine-129 is astronomical. I think it's a 220 or something to 1. So they know the radiation sucks, or the food is sucking up the plants, the biota. And this is what I'm trying to highlight for your potatoes. And they only look at certain isotopes because that's what they can get the money for, right? So all of these communities, people weren't evacuated. Some of them, just a couple of them were evacuated, but they immediately tricked people into going back. All of those communities, except for a couple, they never moved people out. If you had the money, you can move on your own. Like Koriyama City, 341,000 atoms, or 341,000 cesium-137s. It's going to be 100 times more strontium-90, which is a brutal bone seeker. So cesium-137, by the way, will go into the thyroid. It doesn't need to because it pulses energy so much and so hard. Wherever it's in your body, it's going to radiate your thyroid, your pituitary, your adrenaline gland, and everything else, which means you're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of your life. Until you at least your 300th birthday, anyway. And you're going to have a 100 to 1 ratio of strontium-90, but the biggest byproduct is not cesium. It's not strontium-90, which is a 100 to 1 ratio. It's not iodine-129. It's curium isotopes. Curium. Hence the name we call a nuclear meltdown a curium. Those isotopes need lead shielding, and I'll show you that headline coming up. Need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium shielding. And plutonium killed all the animals and all the experiments. What do you think curium is going to do to you? Okay, so 341,000, these are catastrophic numbers. because you got to add in all the other isotopes. It can't just be cesium. It can't just be cesium-134, 137. They know potatoes are sucking up. They know the fruit trees suck up radiation instantly. We know all the communities that should have been abandoned weren't abandoned. So we know the industry is just completely soulless and heartless. And we haven't seen any academics speak up, despite the fact that the academic community has produced millions and millions and millions of studies. And what that means is tens of millions of academics have bought houses and cars and paid for their children's sports, music lessons, and college educations to get a job to come out and bamboozle you for the rest of their lives about nuclear. This is a perpetual misery machine. This technology is not fit for any planet, and definitely not Earth, because there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger that can defend against it. There's nothing with replicating cells that can defend against this, including you, your friends, your loved ones, and everything you ever cared about, and all your food. So you're eating food that's damaged. So even without the radiation, that damaged cells and genetic material in the food is damaged. So you're eating stuff that can give you cancer and other diseases. But it's all soaked up to radiation, unfortunately. And 85 strontium is a very important isotope too, because of its ratio in a nuclear event. And nuclear events never stop. Fukushima will never stop. It particulated decades of reactor cores and turned it into radioactive particle fallout. Those particles are splitting atoms. And the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs from spraying the salt water on the reactors, you're liberating the sulfur, creates these spherical balls, and they ingest these super hot particles, and they're very mobile. They don't need jet streams to traverse the entire biosphere of the planet. 134 cesium, 85 strontium in fruit plants. There's nothing they don't know about radiation. I'm going to highlight that for you in a moment a bit better. The district, because we're talking about radioactive soil, 30 million one-ton bags is going to be put into the private sector too. And that could end up in your flower pots here in Canada, United States, worldwide. And they will do that in a drop of a hat. Like your smoke detectors have americium-241 into it. If you ingest it, and this stuff should be on a nuclear waste site for 250 million years. And so what they do, they have this tiny amount. It's considered harmless because it's in a smoke detector on your ceiling. It doesn't pulse energy too far. So therefore, technically, according to the industry, which changed the rules in increments over many decades, it's okay. But when you're finished with your smoke detector, you throw it in the garbage, right? When it breaks or you want a new one or whatever the case may be, they're dirt cheap, right? The idea is to, instead of storing americium for 250 million years, they put it in your home, you put it in the garbage dump incinerates it, and you release it into the environment. And the amount we're talking about is catastrophic. It's the same thing with emergency exit signs that glow in the dark. That's from tritium-3H. They're thrown into the dump within 10 years of their purchasing, which means they're going to get crushed, and that you got incredible radioactive dumps. Like the whole system is designed perfectly to slaughter every species on the planet. You don't need a nuclear accident. You just need fuel pools and nuclear power plants, and everything else will happen. Translocation of isotopes to edible plants. All of these communities abandoned. The second line is the population. The third line is just acknowledging a very brutal, cesium-137 is a very brutal isotope. All right. Bear with me. These stories are incredibly complicated, but I have enough documentation that if you've never been here before, you're going to end up with an education you'll never get on this planet ever anywhere else. Okay, so now they understand all these facets of radiation I just showed you, how the plants will suck it up, how it gets up the root system, how the fruits become incredibly radioactive because of bioaccumulation. But how much do they really know about radiation? I'm going to explain that to you in a second. We're almost there. We're there right now. Okay, so I'm not going to go into details of any of these studies, but what I want you to take away from all of this is not only have they studied millions and millions of studies on plants and food sucking up radiation, and the idea that is to downplay it so they can legally give it to you in the supermarket, because every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. But there's another facet that people don't appreciate of how knowledgeable this industry actually is. And so let me play this clip. After Fukushima, Dr. Jacqueline Yates came out. Now what you're looking at here is one of a bunch of studies I'm about to show you. But I want you to appreciate how much they really know about radioactive emissions. We know it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, radioactive fallout. We know when it's in your body, the dose is magnified by trillions, because there's pulsing energy in every direction in your body, destroying chromosomes, cells, and DNA, whether you're an insect, bird, mammal, animal, an elephant, or a whale. You don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Okay. So this is a 30-second clip I'm going to play of Dr. Jacqueline Yates. She was brought in on a telephone at MIT after day 6 of Fukushima to explain to people about the harmful effects of radioactive fallout. She's going to make the assertion. Now, MIT's got hundreds of professors and academics that are nuclear experts. They didn't ask them on stage in front of a seated audience of pro-nuclear. They brought in Dr. Jacqueline Yates.
Now, unfortunately, we have very little data, almost no data, about how much radiation we can live with in terms of elevated background levels. All of our data about the health effects of radiation come from a situation in which all the doses delivered in less than a minute. And so we just don't know how much radiation can be, what kind of contamination level can be considered safe.
Okay, and now that's the fish. This is MIT. They've promoted nuclear for 90-something. They just celebrated 90 years, was it? Last year or the year before? We covered that. And so what I'm going to introduce you to is just a fraction. And I mean, when I say fraction, I mean a fraction of a percentage of a percent of a percent of a percent of studies that I have. So imagine how many are out there. And what I want you to appreciate now, I'm not going to try to explain any of this to you. We're just going to slowly go through a couple of dozen right quick here. I want you to be able to glance at each of these studies and imagine to yourself, now that line up, that, let me just move myself so I can set this up. So if they brought in these people instead of Jacqueline Yates, they would have said, we know everything about radiation fallout, okay? And these are all the people who were on the studies that got their name on it. That are okay, so think about what they really, Jacqueline Yates, MIT University, brought her in to say those words. Very little is known, and everything we know is about a dose for 1 minute. It's simply not true. And so far from the truth that they should lose their degrees. There should be a penalty. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation, and that's why we're in the boat we're in. So they understand these are all about radioactive atoms. These are all about adverse side effects from radioactive atoms, and this is them showing different attributes. Now, the idea of all of this is right, they can get huge hundreds of thousands of dollars to do these studies because the nuclear industry controls your university and your government's wallets when it comes to academic studies. And in North America, it's 4.3 million studies a year. Over half of them or more are man-made anthropogenic radiation, not the solar system. in radiation-induced toxicity. So this is radiation-induced toxicity, is every one of these studies that I'm showing to you. I just want you to appreciate Jacqueline Yates and MIT hoodwinked you on purpose so they can harm you by making you complacent. And that's why I got the big views. That's why I got millions of people watching every show. 14 people watching my show. Damage in rats through inhibition of oxidized stress. So they really appreciate the cell death. They really appreciate the details, the minutiae of the minutiae, the details of the details. They know everything. They know every microscopic thing about nuclear. And I can go through these studies for hours and hours and hours, and at that point then we're maybe a 1% of the studies I got on it. So how is it MIT University doesn't have any of this and doesn't know about any of this? How is that possible? Affects the DNA damage induced by ionizing radiation in humans. Advanced treatment of antibiotic wastewater by ionizing. It's one of the most insidious studies, is these types of studies, where you got really wastewater that's very toxic. And what they do is they irradiate it like you do with your food, and they kill all the nutrition in your food, and they kill all the fungus and the bacteria in the wastewater. And then therefore the wastewater is now safe. And so they'll feed that to cattle and sheep and everything else and chickens. Because humans can't drink it, but they can eat the process of it. The industry is insane. If the nuclear industry never showed up, this planet would be spectacular. It would be spectacular. You would see, and we used to have 46 million migratory birds here, pre-Fukushima. Now we have literally no survival rates of the fledglings. We're talking about 3%, 4% ultimately will survive. An appropriate balanced mechanical ionizing radiation shielding performance across some 10 binary alloys, a comparative investigation. They can investigate everything about every facet of radiation except for Fukushima. That's quite convenient, isn't it? Like, they know everything about radioactive fallout. They know there's nothing they don't know. There's nothing they don't have 1,000 studies on. They have done study after study after study after study from different institutions, so that ultimately they can look at all the studies and get a consensus that they don't get to see the studies. So when a university is doing studies, it'll go to Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, which has 20,000 journals. They'll give them $1 million or $500,000, or like Harvard University spends around $6 million a year on leasing for that 1 year studies. And a lot of these are studies they already produced. Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley gets the copyrights to them. And then now if Harvard wants to use the study, they have to spend millions of dollars to the same journal to use it for 1 year. Like the word controlling the information, you really got to look at the nuclear industry to appreciate how diabolical and how backwards we're talking. There is a method to the madness. The idea is you got all these other institutions. So the university doesn't have access to the 4.3 million studies from last year or the year before, 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 the year before. They don't have access. They have access to a very tiny fraction from one of the 20,000 journals that they pay to get access from. And so the idea of that is the university can only do studies about whatever it is the journals want them to do the study about. And then the government will give them the money to do the studies, which is the taxpayers' money. So instead of spending on infrastructures and hospitals and taking care of the elderly and everything else, humane things, the money is snatched and distributed through the nuclear industry's lapdogs and cheerleaders and bootlickers, which are these people. Each of these studies, all the people in the studies, and you can see their names right with the alphabet alongside their name below it. When you look at each of these studies, ask yourself, was Jacqueline Yates at MIT on day 5 of Fukushima being honest when she made the assertion that very little is known about the effects of radiation? Aging and age-related health effects of ionizing radiation. Does that sound like they don't know what they're talking about? Does that sound like they're unaware, like Jacqueline Yates' assertion? They know every facet, and that is terrifying. That is the most terrifying thing about that. That is horrifying. And I'm just going to zip through this. I just want you to appreciate that they actually really do know. And this is not an opinion. They know everything about man-made radiation. They know everything. There's nothing they don't know. And they know for a fact, unequivocally, without exception, without reservation, that it's lethal to everything with replicating cells. And so when you hear me talking about it's lethal to everything with replicating cells, look at the headlines, right? Okay. I want to cover a few more of them first, because they'll disappear back down the black hole of documentation that I've acquired over 23 years of covering this horrible, dishonorable, insufferable industry. And the idea is to keep you divided, and all you gotta do is censor someone like me. And so they're really good at this. Prostate cancer cells to ionizing radiation. Is there anything they don't know about anthropogenic man-made radiation? That's the question everybody needs to ask themselves. Is there really anything they don't know? Because I can't comprehend what they don't know after everything we've covered on this site alone and my other site before YouTube took it down. Right, 24,800 subscribers for 5 years. Never gained one, never lost a single one for 5 years. And I was out on the ocean for 4 to 5 months each year doing research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. They know everything about radiation. There is nothing they don't know about ionizing radiation and heart risk. Imagine if that's going to happen to you, what's happening to the birds and the insects and the bees and the flower or the plants and everything else, the small microscopic animals, the creatures, the biotas. They know everything. They know this destroys everything with replicating cells. I do this because I'm desperate for the planet to survive. I'm desperate for the species. I'm desperate for hope. And so I've been at this for so long. I used to do them 7 days a week. If I wasn't on the ocean doing research expeditions, I was blasting the nuclear industry 7 days a week. And now I'm doing it 5 days a week. There is nothing, embryos of zebrafish, studies of non-targeted effects of ionizing radiation. There is nothing they don't know about anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. There's nothing they don't know. And they know stuff that I can't even pronounce, for goodness sakes. It's surreal, isn't it? Selenium, which is supposed to be a good thing, right, was alleged to have reversed autism in children with severe autism temporarily, so that if you kept it in their diets, you might be able to reverse it, for goodness sakes. You have to go look up that stuff on BitChute or something, and that'll get you close to where you need to go after. Influences of ionizing radiation, mechanical properties. Like, there's nothing they don't know. Measured during ionizing radiation treatment. See, this is insane that they do that. Ionizing radiation is not a treatment of wastewater, it's radioactive water, it's tritiated water now. It's better to have wastewater than tritiated water, trust me. And it's still wastewater, it just doesn't have the toxins in it anymore, but now it's toxic. There is no redeeming attributes in the nuclear industry. They have so many goblins, actual real-life goblins. The people that are censoring me, for instance, the people, the pro-nuclear community, the Japanese nuclear industry and stuff like that hate my guts. I'm not the bad guy here. They're bad. They only hate me because they don't want their families to find out that they're monsters and serial killers and mass omnicide machines, right? They know what they're doing is wrong. They have all the studies. They know what I'm saying is true. And they know it's more true than the average person can appreciate. Common interspecies specific toxic effects in 3 wild fish species after chronic gamma irradiation of early stages. Is there anything they don't know? I can't say, well, you don't know this or you don't know that, because they do. Not only do, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of studies. No matter what facet I'm going to bring up, they have thousands of studies to downplay it or to actually understand it. But you'll never get to see those unless you come here. And typically you're going to get the downplayed version. Does anybody really believe, after what we just went through, that they don't know what they're talking about, that they don't know the adverse side effects, that they don't know it's wrong to take radioactive soil from a nuclear meltdown event and then reuse it in public works, in farmers' fields and everything else? Is there anybody on the planet can prove me that they don't know? I double dare you. I double dare you. Prove me wrong. Okay. Here we go. I only took 52 minutes. How much did he censor me last night? And last night, the statistics don't show up for me now, in the last week, and that's the first time after all these years, is the first time I've never seen the statistics show up. Last night was dismal. I got 134 views last night, 147 in the show before. They just hate my guts, eh? But I'm not, it's just because that's who they are. That's what they do. That's their job. They got hired because they have so much hate, right? Hello, everybody. Welcome back. How's everybody doing? I'll just take a quick boo at the comments because I get caught up in these stories, and if I'm not careful, I'll lose my train of thought. And if I lose my train of thought, then you notice what happened. You might end up with a show like last night, which was a good show. It was just I had lost my train of thoughts that I wanted to cover, and that's a great thing, though. Don't get me wrong. They're probably some of the best shows. They're the type of shows you want to download and keep because I go down to darkness. Like we did tonight, the first 50 minutes tonight, we went down that darkness. These are important. Those types of videos are the most important videos. Like the first 50 minutes, the rest of the show too, but the first 50 minutes is these epiphanies where I'm able to show you and how to win a debate and an argument that with documentation that is incontestable, is unassailable information, right? And then I'll screw it up and touch my glasses, and then all hell breaks loose for about a minute as I try to get my glasses to the point where I'm not having to squint. I think the solution is buy 10 pairs of glasses. If I was wealthy, I would have 10 pairs. And I would hire somebody to keep them clean for me. And then as soon as one got a little bit iffy, I would pick up another clean pair and put them in a special holder where somebody would eventually take it up and clean it before the next show, right? Or I can just get laser surgery and fix my eyes, maybe. I don't know if it's cataracts or... Japan announces this is... I love this kind of stuff. So this was a story from May the 29th, 2001. So you got March 11th, April 11th, April 11th, March, April, May 11th is 2 months. So this is 2 months and 18 days. 2 and 2/3 of a month. So 60, 70, 80 days later, they say Japan announced the cooling system restored at the fuel pools of number 1 to 4, as breakdown of cooling occurs at number 5 pool. Now, number 5 was the only building that had no damage that I can tell. Number 1, 2, and 3, and 4, the tsunami ran right through it and all those communities for 1,200 kilometers and stripped out the infrastructure. Does it look like they've restored power to the building to your left that doesn't exist anymore, reactor 4? Does reactor 3 look like they restored power to the fuel pools that were at the very top of these buildings? Japan announced the cooling systems restored at the fuel pools of number 1 to 4. Simply not true. It's the furthest thing from the truth. And the problem is they got away with it. Every time they get away with it, then they get more emboldened, they become more belligerent, and they literally got an endless amount of money to destroy me and people like you, right? To silence you and to hound you and stalk you and everything else. And so if they don't spend the money, then they'll lose it, so they'll go out and do that stuff. International Atomic Energy Agency says the public, this was a story from 2023. This was the first part of 2023, by the way. International Atomic Energy Agency says public trust is the key to projects using radioactive soil, which is the topic for tonight. And so they were dumping the soil, cutting open the bags and dumping it. But you see all the people, there's people there, and there's no way to protect those people. And this was one of the people from the International Atomic Energy Agency, and she says, the International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulatory agency, and therefore the International Atomic Energy Agency is not in a position to judge or approve Japan's recycling soil projects. But what is it you hear about the International Atomic Energy Agency is a regulatory, right? They're the shakers and movers. They got the final say. Why would a non-governmental company with no sovereignty over any country be in that position? Why would you give them those authorities over your facilities in all your countries worldwide? Why would you do something like that? What could compel humanity to do something like that? Well, there's nothing that can compel it. This was done through dirty, crooked public relation firms and political noting that the group's task is to make sure Japan is in line with their safety standards on disposal of radioactive waste. How can you make sure when you don't have any sovereignty over the country and you can't compel any country to do anything? And then you admit that you're not a regulatory agency and you're not in a position to judge or approve, but in the same friggin' sentence you claim that their group's task / job is to make sure that the Japan's plan is in line with their safety standards. Well, clearly they don't have a safety standard. If they don't have any regulatory attributes whatsoever, how can you call them a standard? 30 million tons of contaminated soil are stocked in open-air sites. This was Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera currently says it's 60 million. Japan says there's only 14 million. Who are we going to believe? Now, I showed you the documentation at the beginning of it that there's 30 million one-ton bags in 2016. Let me just play that little clip of Al Jazeera talking about 60 million one-ton bags. This was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Here we go. The volume might be sketchy, so I'm going to turn it down. I might have to replay because it's so short. And the volume is currently all the way up.
There's about 60 million tons of,
Let me do that again.
there's about 60 million tons.
60 million tons, and each one of these bags is 1 ton. So there's 10 rows of traffic around the entire planet.
Of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
Outside the actual Fukushima perimeter fence. Now, these were all picked up in the communities. These have nothing, they weren't taken from Fukushima's site. Japan to ramp up search for a disposal site. This is the first story. We've been stuck on this story now for 1 hour. So approximately 14.1 million cubic meters of soil have been placed at interim storage facilities. And so this is what they acknowledge. Where did the other 16 million tons of radioactive, now they call it removed soil. They don't call it radioactive soil, they're removed soil. This is not removed soil, it's nuclear wastes. Japan plans to step up its search for a final disposal site for soil. This is not soil, this is radioactive waste. Removed during the cleanup. This is not cleaning up after the Fukushima nuclear disaster. This deserves an incredible amount of prominence. So these communities was a recent story of where the food is banned by, I think it's 20 countries. It's still banned today. Half of the country. Soil, but not radioactive soil. With radioactive cesium. Well, you can't just have radioactive cesium. The bags, by the way, are 100 minimum of cesium was the criteria. They refused to acknowledge gammas or any other gammas, neutrons, betas, or alphas, and X-rays by proxy. They're just acknowledging gamma, and they're clearly not acknowledging gamma, the significant amount of gamma. It's 100,000 atoms per kilogram in each of these 1 ton bags. They're equivalent of a dirty bomb. Soil and soil waste, soil and other waste. So they're very deceptive. They slim down from 30 million, some say 60 million, to 14 million. Now, 2/3 of that, or I'm sorry, 3/4 of that or more, they say is below 8,000 atoms per kilogram. But you can't, these don't, because their original assessments were on cesium-137 with a 300-year life. So it can't decay down in 14 years from 100,000 atoms, which is the minimum. It could be millions of atoms per kilogram, and many times is. So that soil can't just magically lose its integrity of radioactive anthropogenic man-made isotopes in 14 years. It's still going to be 100,000 per kilogram. But what they want you to believe is that it's 8,000 atoms per kilogram, which is 500,000 per square meter, and other waste. Well, the waste we're talking about is radioactive material, like could be radioactive leaves and radioactive branches and radioactive everything else. United States was hit with an extremely large peak of Fukushima radioactive material. So are all the emaciated whales we're seeing now. Significant plutonium. Well, I mean, the food was banned in those same prefectures, 14 prefectures actually, by 55 countries for more than a decade. And right within 5 days, we were aware that you had 8 fuel pools. This is on the 15th of March, day 4, there was 4 reactor buildings have lost their inventories, which included 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings, which was decades of reactor cores. And I'm not sure what this story was. I'll see in a second. In 2015, radiation Fukushima still affects 32 million Japanese. You can see 1-ton bags on the side of the river and scumbag safe cast. I really despise safecast, particularly people like Asby Brown and likes. Radioactivity from the plant was measured globally and blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. Blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. And here's what that would have looked like. We have a perpetual amount of documentation, a seemingly endless amount. So when they're talking about plutonium, right? Released for months. This plume is Neptunium-239, decays to plutonium in 2.5 days. 2.5 days, it does its first decay, which is 50% of that will turn to plutonium in 2.5 days. The model is based on 20 days. The study, this is total release evaluation. So they took what TEPCO acknowledged, which was a fraction of the inventories that actually got out. I mean, it lost 4 buildings and 8 fuel pools. And it's easy to assume they lost 36 total reactor cores. Pure uranium, pure plutonium reactor cores. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. Windscale was a graphite reactor. These were small reactors. It doesn't mitigate the fact that the harmfulness per se, but when you compare it to Japan's reactors, pure plutonium, pure uranium, each reactor in Japan was at least 100 Chernobyls in volume, and toxicity it's much worse because, don't get me wrong, Chernobyl, and I mean was brutal, what it done to our planet. It's brutal. They actually done sex ratio studies on Europe because they were able to quantify the harmful effectiveness, the effects of it. And what they mean by that is the study will look for more males than females being born, and they can quantify radioactive fallout covered all of Europe that way, because that's one of the attributes. And that's going to be true for all the species. So if you have more males than females, you have less population, ultimately, in the long term. So nuclear radioactive fallout is the best way to exterminate all species in increments over time. We're 8 decades in, but Japan's reactors, Fukushima reactors, were a pulse event. These were unprecedented numbers. These were unconscionable numbers. They're going to downplay the numbers you're looking at. Don't get me wrong. They're really good at downplaying it. But we actually have the studies of the numbers. The numbers, and here's one of them here, right? Significant amount of plutonium for months. So plutonium blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. And it did. We got more proof, right, of that. And we have the plutonium studies based on TEPCO's numbers too. The TEPCO acknowledged originally. Currently, TEPCO refuses to acknowledge any of this. They moved the goalposts with the help of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Taiwan, South Korea, China, and Japan. Decided to indoctrinate the Asian population of the planet. And they worked together with the help of coordinated by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has over 1,000 public relation firms at its beck and call, 195 countries that will regurgitate whatever they say officially in the media, no matter how egregious of a lie it is. And so they're able to influence, what's the Asian population of the planet? 6.4 billion people or something. So theoretically, right, they're able to reach in every nook and cranny of 6.4 million Asians That's a huge jump. Japan adopts a roadmap for disposal of soil from decontamination. Now, they say they got to get it outside of Fukushima prefecture, but it's still radioactive. If you take it to the prefecture, you still got the toxicity. And there's only, it's only 3% of the land that they picked that up on, mostly farmers' fields. In other words, 97% of the Fukushima prefecture had no mitigating efforts whatsoever. And we know they dumped probably 100 million tons into rivers and streams and ocean. We know that now, right? Following the triple meltdown at Fukushima, you'll always hear that word, triple nuclear meltdown. That's a very important connotation. Now they exclude reactor 4. They say that didn't melt down because the fuel, they were doing a fuel change, which means only about 1/3 or 1/4 of the fuel was taken out. And so officially this is reactor 4, but officially that's reactor 4. I can't tell the difference. I don't know about you, but I can't tell the difference. I certainly can't tell the difference. So how come I got 7 people on my show? It's such an important, it's probably the most important show in human history. I got 7 people. They're desperate to discourage somebody out there, I guess. So the building to your left, allegedly that didn't happen, so that's not counted. But do you think it happened? Will you agree with me that something happened to that building to your left that actually doesn't look like that? Will you give me that? Now we got 4 people watching my show because I'm a terrible person, obviously, right? Dana, you're a terrible person. I can't watch your show. After all these years, you're talking about pigs. How can I watch that show? Oh, wow, we're getting better at it. Now I got 1 person on my show. Really, I got 1 person on my show. That's it. That could be me because I'm on my show here. So I'm the only person watching my show. This is terrible. Well, the show got to go on. Triple nuclear meltdown. Do you believe that building melted down? Is it hard to comprehend that building to your left melted down? At the top of it was 8 reactor cores and 2 fuel pools. Does that matter? Just because they are pretending they're at the top of the building. Just because all your mainstream media is pretending they're at the top of the building, does that really matter though? Did the building melt down or did the building melt down? Did the building melt down? I don't know. I can't tell, Dana. The media didn't tell me what to think. It's not a triple meltdown. It's 36 reactor cores melted down. It's not even meltdowns. They don't even put an S on it, eh? Currently about 14 million cubic meters of soil. This is not soil. It's got nothing to do with soil. It doesn't have any attributes anymore of soil. It's nuclear waste. That's why you spent $48 billion and picked up 30 million one-ton bags. It's not because of soil. From the decontamination work is stored temporarily near the plant. The plant doesn't exist anymore. It's not stored temporarily, and that's an interesting word, by the way. It's not stored. It's outdoors. When it rains, it washes it out into the ocean, which is right alongside of it. Radioactive concentrations of 8,000 atoms. So a becquerel is a pulse of energy from an atom, a man-made anthropogenic atom at the speed of light. It pulses energy in every direction at the speed of light. Directs your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. It put lesions, permanent lesions to your organs. Every second you're being bombed. Your body tries to repair the damage every second. It can't do that and it has to attack the source. And you could have 1 million atoms in you. Every one, if you live long enough, every one of them will turn into a cancer because your body attacks every one with white blood cells for the rest of your life. Every white blood cell, by the way, And at the same time, every one of repulsion energy at speed of light, your body has to attack the damage and try to repair it, so with more white blood cells. So you have less oxygen, less nutrition, because every white blood cell has to displace a red blood cell. Red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. And so quite a few years back, we made the hypothetical scenario. You would see road rage explode. You would see air rage, particularly right away, explode. And you would see bar fights explode because the radiation is displacing oxygen, which is how you get intoxicated from alcohol, right? So when you go to the bar, you're full of a lot of radiation. You're already low on oxygen. You start drinking alcohol, 2 or 3 drinks, and you're doing stupid stuff you would never conceive. But because you have reached that threshold where you have not enough oxygen to be rational and you're significantly impaired from the toxicity and the lack of oxygen. So 8,000 atoms a kilogram is 500,000 atoms per square meter on the soil. These are absurd numbers. And it suggests that that's not going to have any adverse side effects for the biota, the insects, the birds, mammals, the animals, the food, everything, the air quality, and so this is the kind of stuff that will contaminate everything in proximity too. That becomes eventually everything is irradiated. Currently, it looks like all the fresh water and salt water now is tritiated due to the massive radioactive fallout worldwide, not just Japan, but worldwide. So they want to use 75% of the total. They're claiming it magically went from 100,000 minimum atoms per kilogram to 8,000. It's just the science doesn't work that way. It's not gonna like the biggest byproduct is not cesium, by the way, which is what they're talking about. It's curium isotopes, and that toxicity is around for long past the human experience. Let's put it that way. Let me see what we got done here. Chickadee, chickadee, China. Chickadee, chickadee, China. And there's a lot of curium isotopes, right? And, oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had the screen up. Hang on. Right there. So curium, I don't even know what isotope I'm under now. 245 has a half-life of 8,561 years. And 244 has a half-life of 18 years. And 243 has a half-life of 29 years. And right, you get the picture, you know what I'm saying, right? So you got all these, they're all man-made, right? It's got a half-life of 348,000 years. And so it doesn't have enough energy, but enough energy to kill your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, or birds, or mammals, or animals for 3.4 million years. Right, there's 10 decays, and that's why. And so there's no way the soil is broken down in 14 years to 8,000 atoms per kilogram or less. It's simply not true. And there's 16 million bags missing that they haven't explained away. And they want to reuse it. They want to give it for public reuse to private companies. Record disposal of outside the Fukushima by March. Well, why not just dig a big mine shaft and store it there for 1 million years. Why do you need to Why did you pick it up if you're going to put it back into the ecosystem? Why did you spend $48 billion? You picked it up because it was lethal, right? And that was you're trying to calm down the planet. You're trying to win the trust in your country. And then when people stop paying attention, now you're fighting constantly, right? You got all the ministers, you're having big meetings, everybody wants everybody to agree. Like you never stopped growing food right alongside the 1 ton bags of radiation, which meant you had no intention of being sincere and genuine and honest and honorable, right? You had zero intentions. This was Stanford, so I show this map a lot of this radioactive fallout. Now they downplayed it, but the whole thing is, it covers the whole planet in 19.5 days. They're willing to acknowledge that. And because we have numbers, right, where it proves that they're lying about the enormity amount of it and the harmfulness of it. James was telling me, he sent me a text earlier of a crazy picture. I'm not going to tell you what the picture is in case he uses it. I know he posted a video. Russia outsmarts France with nuclear power move in Niger. So France had destroyed Niger with a civil war for 60 years so they get their hands on a very high-grade uranium for dirt cheap. And so you'll often hear connotations in the media of France uses 70% of France's power comes from nuclear. It's dirt cheap, they say. It's dirt cheap because they destroyed several million people's lives for over 60 years, caused a civil war, destroyed the country, environmentally wrecked the country, so they can get their hand, and caused a civil war for over 60 years so they can get their hands on cheap uranium. 70% of the fresh water, by the way, in France goes to the nuclear industry, and they don't have glaciers post-Fukushima anymore. And so now a lot of plants have to shut down in the summertime because the rivers don't have any cold water coming down from the glaciers, and they don't. And by proxy, you would keep the level of the river too. See, not only cool it down, but keep the level. And each reactor. So each reactor, not reactor site, but each reactor is using 6,450,000 1-ton pickup trucks of water every 24 hours. That's the best way to describe it. So how much energy does it take to move 6 million, pump it, controlled, and filtered the water, because they kill millions of creatures, billions of small baby fish and everything, every year in each nuclear reactor. Not site, but reactor. Japan to ramp up search for disposal site for soil from Fukushima disaster. This is a story that comes up over and over. These are cabinet meeting ministers. These are all ministers. And their job is to do whatever the nuclear industry tells them. And that's why they got the job. So here's one of the headlines. Hot materials, official. It says hot materials with 7 billion atoms per kilogram. Like 7 million is terrifying. 7 billion is insane. Of cesium 15 kilometers from Fukushima plant. Most likely came from Unit 3. Over 7,500 atoms per kilogram of it is plutonium and americium. These are, so you're talking about 500,000 atoms per square meter of just plutonium and americium. These are insane numbers. These are unsurvivable numbers in increments over a few decades for humanity and the species. And we're already seeing it playing out. I've done 7 die-off videos. You should go back and watch the first one in this series that we still got a long way to go. I jumped on this story tonight because it's in the lexicon out there currently. And I want to draw attention to the story and to the soil and to these particular attributes and to the egregious betrayal that we're seeing worldwide for every university, every medias. Hot material with 7 billion atoms a kilogram of cesium, 7 billion per kilogram. So you want to take that, and I'll just explain how to to configure that properly. This is my fun moment. So let me have my fun moment. Oh, there we go. All right, so you got to take 7. Let's give it a different number. 7 billion. 1, 2, 5. Give it a random numbers, but over 7 billion, right? Okay, so you want to multiply that by 66.6, and that'll give us a square meter. Is 467 billion atoms per square meter. 467 billion atomic. Now, my Geiger counter, you see 167 at the top of the screen. That would typically be an evacuation zone at a nuclear power plant. 167 atoms. 467 billion atoms is an evacuation. You should evacuate the country, you see? And so think about when it rains, this is the kind of stuff that's getting washed out into the ocean. But because the toxicity and the energy we're talking about, all the leaves and branches and plant matter and insects and everything else, well, whether it's your car tire, anything that's in this environment, becomes incredibly radioactive. And that contributes ultimately, right, to perpetually growing numbers every day of contamination being produced by being in proximity to the radiation itself. These are incredible numbers. And these are numbers that they acknowledge. And like 7,500 atoms a kilogram of plutonium is almost 500,000 atoms per square meter. So they're talking about that whole area, right? There's 15 kilometers away. It's not just a single spot. It's that whole part of the country has those particular attributes. They call it soil, but it no longer has anything to do with soil. It no longer has the attributes of what soil is. It no longer has nutrients. It no longer has biota. It no longer has microscopic animals. And it's unbelievably harmful to everything with replicating cells. It's catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And so when you talk about radioactive cesium, how can you have just radioactive cesium from a nuclear meltdown and radioactive fallout? How did that happen? It doesn't work that way. I've never seen a good thing about the nuclear industry. Suffered fuel meltdowns. And we see these connotations a lot, which is completely disproportionate to what is actually going on. This didn't suffer anything. We had a catastrophic nuclear meltdown event. It shouldn't be described as the word suffered. You suffered because you've been poisoned. Your children and your friends and your families and your loved ones have been poisoned and probably died, many of them, from it. Fuel meltdowns at 3. Well, what about reactor 4? Clearly reactor 4 melted down. How can you say that building to your left didn't have a meltdown? How can you justify it? And how can academics and scientists worldwide justify not coming out and questioning that? And saying, hey, wait a second. Because they're all in on it. Because they hate your guts. I mean, they hate your guts. All of these are journalists. So when your friends are watching TV and they're talking about this journalist told them this journalist told them that, by rights you should just puke on them to get their attention long enough to make them appreciate how brainwashed they actually are. Like, trusting a journalist is the last thing that anybody with any kind of resemblance of rationale would do. Why would you trust a journalist after the nuclear industry has proven unequivocally we can't trust journalism or the media? You simply can't do it. You're an idiot if you trust journalists. That's one of the saddest statements imaginable. As nuclear reactors releasing radiation into the atmosphere. Well, the radiation into the atmosphere It covered the whole planet, as I showed you. So the brainwashing is very strong. Cleanup work, you can't clean up from a nuclear meltdown. And using homeless and destitute victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, they don't know how to clean up from a nuclear meltdown. Nearby areas led to the accumulation. The radiation covered the entire planet. It's not just nearby areas. The food, like I started off showing you all the communities that were abandoned by the government, but the people were forced to stay there. The food was banned by 55 countries for a decade, and those people who'd done the banning in those countries were replaced by the pro-nuclear community. And there's still 20 countries that ban the food. Canada never ever banned the food. Canada had removed all, well, he did for 93 days, then he removed the restrictions. And so in the first number of years, Japan was shipping all the radioactive food to Canada. And when the Olympics were about to start off, leading up to the Olympics, 2018, 2019, every supermarket in Canada had a section of Japanese food, right? And they were encouraging you to buy the food to promote, to help the Olympics. By doing it, you would help the Olympics. So a lot of people bought into that. And they lost their children, their parents, their own health. This is a genocide, what we're talking about. And move ahead to now. Now they're moving people in from third world countries because most people now have become obese from the radiation poisoning, which is a marker of brain damage, and unhealthy and unable to complete their jobs, and they're being replaced by invaders of military ages on top of that. It's insidious what we're seeing going on, and it's organized. You can't call it contaminated soil when it's nuclear waste. You got to call it what it is, nuclear waste. Calling it soil is the most dishonest thing you could do. Approximately 14 million cubic meters. It's over 30 million cubics in 2016. They didn't stop picking it up. Damaged soil waste must be removed outside the prefecture. But the soil was only picked up from 3% of the ground, mostly farmland, and communities they wanted to move the complacent back into, that were stupid enough to have any kind of fate in this industry. By law, so we're talking about the ultimate corruption when law forces you to do this in order to cover up crimes against humanity. Expert panel, and the expert panel are the pro-nuclear scum that we've covered most likely many, many times already over many years. These are expert monsters. These are sadistic, demonic, possessed, inhuman creatures. They don't have a single human attribute. In an attempt to demonstrate that nuclear waste is safe for use, some was spread in front of the Prime Minister's office in July. It was 1 ton. It's absurd to suggest by putting it somewhere else now it's magically okay. And by putting it in flower beds is now magically okay, is it? Really? And so anybody that regurgitates, any journalists that are saying that, deserves to be called out. The International Atomic Energy Agency is a sadistic, demonic, subhuman, monstrous entity that is out to murder you and your friends and your families and your loved ones. 2023. Japan gets United Nations nuclear watchdog approval for water release. Do you remember me mentioning earlier that UN, here was UN, I showed you the information saying they're not a regulatory agency, they don't have any authority, they're not in a position to approve or disapprove of Japan's plans. And Japan would have the final say. So they get the UN watchdog approval, but they're not a watchdog, and UN shouldn't exist. They were created in the ashes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were previously known, mind you, as the League of Nations, which was a globalist entity of very wealthy, influential countries that had got together to be a gang, basically, which made it harder for a single country to attack that way, right? UN gives Japan a stamp of approval for Fukushima water release. Now, Grossi was there to pick up $19 million. The day before he done that, Japan, who's the third biggest donor of 195 countries to the International Atomic Energy Agency and UN, gave Rafael Grossi, the day before this, a $19.4 million check. $19.4 million check. And then Grossi the next day gets his picture taken and says, we give him a stamp of approval. That check better not bounce. And this is an absurd assertion. International Atomic Energy Agency assures the safety of water release from the Fukushima site. They assure it. Oh, by the way, he emphasized, Grossi, the guy I just showed you, emphasized the International Atomic Energy Agency report that its document is neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. But wait a second. The headline of the story says you endorse it, assures the safety by those connotations, and yet you don't endorse it. It's neither a recommendation nor an endorsement, and that the Japanese government has the final say on the issue. So even if they reject it, which they don't, which they absolutely didn't, they gave a stamp of approval, and they assured the safety when it couldn't be assured. Curium-244, with a 3,400-year half-life, detected for the first time outside the Fukushima plant, requires a lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. If a Curium-244 emits a 500 times greater flux of neutrons on top of that, it has a higher gamma emission requiring a shield that is 20 times thicker, 2 inches of lead compared to 0.1 for plutonium. 2 inches of lead compared to 1.2 for plutonium. So, and which is the biggest byproduct, I'll show you that right now. Curium isotopes, which are 100% man-made like plutonium, are all man-made. I'm just waiting for my system to catch up. Here we go. Yeah. So this study that's going to pop up in about a second, or two, or three, or four. Curium isotopes are the major byproduct in the radiated nuclear fuel and comprise a significant fraction. Now, forget the fact of the alphas emitting radionuclides. It's the major byproduct. In other words, not cesium, not iodine, not plutonium, even though they're produced in catastrophic amounts. Now, the reason this is important, there's a couple of big reasons. So this is the United States Navy, through Loveless Respiratory Research Institute of New Mexico. Dr. Raymond Gilmedi is the key scientist. He's got 93 studies on beagle dogs and puppies. So 144 beagle dogs, a single inhalation, because beagle dogs got a big nose, they sniff it in, and they're allowed to live out their life. Death from radiation occurred 1.5 to 5.4 years after they were given a tiny sample. Tumors of lung, skeleton, and liver. So there's 3 different tumors for the plutonium: lung, skeleton, and liver. And if you live long enough, you'll get all 3 tumors. The skeleton tumor means you're producing radioactive stem cells for the rest of your life. Bone tumors, which is the skeleton tumor, were found in 93 dogs and were the most common cause of death. So lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death. Does that sound familiar to anybody post-Fukushima? Liver tumors, lung tumors, bone tumors. And liver tumors in 20 dogs were the cause of death in only 2 dogs and occurred later than tumors in bones and lungs. And tumors in 3 organs often occurred in the same animal. And the findings in dogs suggest that similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans. So they were saying that you can expect to see the same attributes in humans from the exposure. Now you need lead shielding 20 times thicker for the curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct. So forget about alphas or gammas or anything else. It's the biggest byproduct of any type of emitter. Gammas, neutrons, betas, or alphas. It's the biggest byproduct is the curium isotopes. And the toxicity of plutonium, which is the same, curium needs 2 inches of lead, where plutonium needs 0.1 inch. So curium is your mortal nightmare, and it can't be discovered by a Geiger counter. My Geiger counter is not going to read plutonium. It was discovered in a separate study, plutonium experiment recalled 1976. It was discovered that human kidneys are 50 times, at least or more, 50 times less efficient than animal kidneys at removing the plutonium. So when they made the assertion of the 144 dogs, the similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans, humans are actually 50 times or more vulnerable than the dogs, and all the dogs died, and they died of terrible, terrible, terrible radiation sickness. Like dying of bone tumors, skeleton tumors, is a terrible way to go. It's a terrible way to go. Yeah, I'm just trying to find one more facet of this story. Japan decides on roadmap for use, disposal. The idea is to reuse everything. And you'll see that coming up, hopefully. Government premises in Tokyo to receive soil, new 5-year roadmap. So they're trying to suggest that this is where it's going to go. But actually what's really going on, and I already explained the propaganda you're seeing on the screen there right now. Just bear with me. Outside of prefecture, at the ministers' meeting on Tuesday this week, outside the prefecture, 14 million cubic meters is stored in an area, but they're not acknowledging there's another 16 million that are missing. It's not removed soil, it's nuclear waste. This is why they spent $48 billion picking it up. It's in a nuclear wasteland of Akuma and Fukushima, which are joined on north and south of the Fukushima ongoing nuclear meltdowns. Hang on, wait for it. You're going to use 75% road embankments and land development projects. They said at 8,000 atoms a kilogram, which is 532,000 atoms per square meter. And it's suggesting that the dose received from the portion of soil would not exceed 1 millisievert a year. It's 1,000 microsieverts. But this is not the dose. You're going to be breathing it in. It's going to be in your food. It's going to be in your water. It's going to be in your ear. It's going to be airborne. It's going to be on your clothing, in your hair. It's going to be in your laundry. It's going to be in your tap water. You're talking about an absurd amount of radiation per kilogram. And there's no way it's 8,000 atoms per kilogram. And it can't just be cesium. The criteria for the bags was 100,000 minimum. That was the minimum criteria. You can't measure this in microsieverts and millisieverts because you're talking about physical atoms. They already acknowledged that by calling it Becquerels. So to conflate Becquerels and millisieverts is not helpful at all. The maximum public exposure allowable under international safety standards, which has been reseeded and expanded in increments and dramatically post-Fukushima originally. Like 1 millisievert a year. You can't call it Becquerels and then millisieverts at the same time. See, millisieverts if you're close to fuel storage and there's energy. Atoms, Becquerels are physical atoms. You can breathe it in. You will, particularly at these catastrophic numbers. According to the roadmap, 80 cubic meters of soil with low radioactivity, their version of low radioactivity is catastrophic amounts, right? Bear with me. So by putting it in a flower garden, therefore now 30 million one-ton bags is good to go. Because we put it in flower beds, nobody died right away. Therefore, everything's great. And for some reason, I haven't got the screen capture. I must have missed it. Where they're going to allow private companies to do it too. Where there is no checks and balances, but there's a lot less. See, the government has to come out and announce what they're doing. The public companies don't. Private companies don't. Like this is what the government does: grown food for sale, because they're not even wearing their stupid, idiotic, pointless paper suits. So clearly it's for sale. In a nuclear wasteland, right alongside of thousands and thousands and thousands of one-ton bags of radioactive fallout. This is a definition of nothing makes sense. This is a definition of what the why are these people so evil? It's like when you look at the legacy of these organizations, that's all you're going to see. You're not going to see anything else only evil. Right? It's the common denominator when it comes to nuclear. Is evil is only allowed to exist. Everything else must be shunned. And starts right there. So 865,000 cancers in the first year. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. Not everybody was aware. Cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury or illness that's going to manifest. I'm not here every chance I can, at least 5 days a week preferably, minimum, if I can handle it, because I'm bored or it's easy or just don't like nuclear or blah 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 blah. I'm here because we're in the most danger humanity has ever been in, and ignoring this and letting the industry continue on their so-called roadmap of contaminating everything and everybody, and disregarding any hope for the future generations or any mitigating effects for any kind of events is life. It's life ending. It's an extinction event for our planet. If you go back 8 videos, you'll see my first presentation. We've just done 7 videos in particular on die-offs. If you go back 8 videos, you'll get the rest of this story. You'll get the foundation for everything I'm talking about and the foundation for the other 6 videos of the die-offs. And if you've never seen that information, that'll be the most... And download that video. Download all 7 of those videos if you really want to get up to speed. We made it. I think that's the end of the show for me tonight. I'm going to check and shit out right now. I know James got a new video out. I'm going to play that. Sight unseen. I just love James's visuals too, right? Hopefully he's got that picture I was talking about. Maybe that's another video, I don't know. We'll see. And shame on everybody in the nuclear industry. Shame on you for trying to murder, basically succeeding in murdering all of us. So one more kick at the poll tonight. We got brutalized again tonight, did we? Should Japan store 30 million one-ton bags of Fukushima radioactive soil, whatever that is, Dana, instead of using it on farms and everywhere else? Does that sound like a crazy idea? They should store nuclear waste rather than putting it back into your communities? Is that an insane assertion? Question? I'm a bad boy. And so we're going to go over, we're going to close the show here with a song, I guess, or a video. I'm thinking it's a song. James Luce is mostly doing songs, right? But he's experimenting with a lot of things. And if you don't do that, then you can't grow, right? We support him 1,000,000%. Nuclear... I can't even focus on that. Whatever it is, I can't wait to see it. You have a great night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great couple of days if that's humanly possible. Unless there's a major event, I'll be back on Sunday. You take care now.
Viability depends on availability. No covenant left to bargain. Yellow cake rosaries. Beads broken. Radioactive unholy mess.